The House Oversight Committee has released 68 new photos from the estate of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This is the third public release from a collection of more than 95,000 images obtained by the committee from Epstein's estate. The release comes just hours before a key deadline for the Department of Justice to disclose its Epstein files. The images range from seemingly routine social encounters to deeply troubling scenes. Among them are photos showing quotes from Lolita written across different parts of a woman's body. The novel by Vladimir Nabokov depicts the grooming and abuse of a young girl by an older man. Lawmakers say the imagery underscores the disturbing nature of Epstein's behavior. Other photos show redacted passports and identification documents belonging to women from several countries. Those countries include Lithuania, Russia, the Czech Republic, and Ukraine. Most identifying details are blacked out, including names and dates of birth. One photo shows Epstein seated at a desk, closely surrounded by 3 women whose faces are hidden.
What's happening, people? Welcome to Dr. John Podcast. Again, at the White House Correspondents Dinner, Trump arrived prepared to command the spotlight with his signature swagger. But the night took an unexpected turn. What unfolded would become one of the most memorable moments of his presidency. And then everything goes sideways in spectacular fashion. Before you can even take 3 steps toward the venue, the entire Washington, D.C. skyline transforms into something straight out of a political nightmare. The buildings around you, the ones you've walked past countless times, the ones that represent American institutional power and prestige, suddenly become massive screens broadcasting your deepest humiliation. The Washington Hilton, that bastion of political gatherings where presidents have spoken for generations, becomes a canvas for your shame. The Kennedy Center, that temple of American culture where the nation celebrates its artistic achievements, becomes a monument to your disgrace.
In the image, one woman appears to touch Epstein under his shirt while another leans toward a nearby laptop. Another image shows a text message exchange discussing payments of $1,000 per girl. Several photos also show Epstein alongside prominent figures, including professor and activist Noam Chomsky, aboard a private plane. Another image shows Bill Gates standing next to a woman whose face is redacted. Additional photos show Steve Bannon and former Alphabet president Sergey Brin at separate events. Previously released images showed figures such as Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. They also included Woody Allen, Larry Summers, and Alan Dershowitz. However, lawmakers emphasize that being pictured does not imply criminal conduct. Many of the individuals shown have denied involvement in Epstein's crimes. The committee says the photos are meant to offer transparency into Epstein's network. Attention now turns to the Department of Justice, which faces a December 19th deadline under the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
The Justice Department building, the very symbol of American law and order, becomes a billboard accusing you of protecting criminals. The Lincoln Memorial, that sacred shrine to America's greatest president, becomes a backdrop for your most damaging scandal. Activists have turned the entire nation's capital into an outdoor theater of anti-Trump propaganda, and the main feature is you partying with a convicted pedophile. The images flicker and pulse across the facades of Washington's most hallowed buildings. There's footage of you alongside Jeffrey Epstein, captured at various events over the years. Images that your team has spent countless hours and millions of dollars trying to bury.
Those who haven't underneath this have been brought down by the needs of men have been usually in some cases where you haven't made the files are there. In one email from 2011, Epstein wrote West Thomas basically there was he told her 2 years after the was put under fire. For New York Magazine, because Epstein that he's really guy. He said, quote, he's a lot of fun to be with.
There's video of you laughing with him, shaking hands with him, standing shoulder to shoulder with him in social settings that now seem so damning. There are photographs that your legal team has tried to scrub from the internet, images that your PR people have desperately attempted to explain away with increasingly convoluted narratives. And now they're being beamed onto buildings visible from every corner of the Capitol. Impossible to ignore, impossible to deny, impossible to spin. The voiceover accompanying these projections pulls no punches whatsoever. It doesn't dance around the issue. It doesn't offer nuance or qualification. It states flatly that you are engaged in a massive cover-up of Epstein's crimes. It declares that you have lied about the nature and extent.
It is even said that he likes beautiful women as well as society. And many of them are on the other side. One police file shows you filled with Epstein's private jet of the express. At least 8 months. Then he lied about it. Like he lied about so many areas of the relationship. And this is culminate in release the files and Epstein emailed Maxwell saying, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Maxwell replied saying, I've been
of your relationship with a man who preyed on vulnerable young women. It demands that you release all documents related to your interactions with Epstein, documents that you have fought tooth and nail to keep hidden from public view. It essentially accuses you of being complicit through your refusal to be transparent about what you knew and when you knew it. And here's what makes this particularly devastating for someone who has built an entire political career on appearing untouchable. There is absolutely nothing you can do about it. The Secret Service can't stop it. The police can't stop it. Your security detail can't stop it. The building owners can't stop it. You can't have the images taken down because they're being projected by people standing on public property, exercising their First Amendment rights in ways that are technically legal and completely beyond your control. Your team can scream into their earpieces. Your aides can frantically try to coordinate some kind of response. Your lawyers can threaten legal action that will take months to process. But right now, in this moment, you have to stand there and watch as your past comes back to haunt you in the most public possible fashion. Your team is absolutely furious. Your aides are panicking. Your communication staff is scrambling to figure out how to respond. But there's no response that works. You can't issue a denial while images of you with Epstein are literally projected across the Washington skyline. You can't claim the footage is fake when it's clearly authentic video from well-documented events. You can't argue the activists are fringe extremists when they're using your own documented history against you. All you can do is watch. All your team can do is watch. All the assembled media can do is film it and broadcast it to millions of viewers who are about to see you humiliated on a scale you never imagined possible. The people stopping to stare are taking photos and videos on their phones. The footage is spreading across social media like wildfire. Within minutes, images of your face next to Epstein's face on the Kennedy Center are trending globally. Within hours, the story has been picked up by every major news outlet in the world. Within days, the images have become permanent fixtures of the internet, searchable and shareable and impossible to delete or suppress. You've been humiliated in your own city, in front of your own people, at the very moment you were trying to project strength and control. That's not just a bad night. That's a catastrophic failure of your entire image management apparatus. This was no random stunt by amateur activists who happened to get lucky. This was a carefully orchestrated, strategically planned, professionally executed operation designed to inflict maximum damage at the most damaging possible moment. The organizers studied Trump's schedule. They knew exactly when he would arrive at the Washington Hilton. They timed their projections to coincide with his appearance for maximum media impact. They selected buildings that would generate the most powerful imagery and the most viral content. They crafted their message to be simple, devastating, and impossible to refute. They understood that nothing damages a man who built his brand on strength more than forcing him to confront his past weaknesses in public. They understood that nothing undermines a man who claims moral authority more than reminding everyone of his associations with people who represent absolute moral bankruptcy. The activists knew precisely what they were doing, and they executed their plan with military precision. The group behind the initial stunt, led by donkeys, has a proven track record of using projection as a weapon against powerful political figures. They've done this before. They've studied what works and what doesn't. They've refined their techniques over years of practice. They know exactly which buildings provide the best canvases, which angles provide the best visibility, which timing provides the best impact. They understand that modern political protest isn't about holding signs or chanting slogans anymore. It's about creating images that penetrate the noise, messages that people can't scroll past, content that spreads organically because it's too powerful to ignore. And they found that projection onto major landmarks is the most effective tool in their arsenal. It's legal, which means police can't shut it down. It's temporary, which means building owners can't press charges for vandalism. It's visually stunning, which means media outlets can't resist covering it. It's highly shareable, which means social media amplifies it exponentially. It's impossible to deny, which means the targets can't claim it didn't happen. It's the perfect weapon for an era when attention is the most valuable currency and nobody has the power to control what goes viral. The first projection stunt at the Washington Hilton was dramatic enough, but the activists weren't finished yet. Just a few months later, another group called VJ Bombs decided to up the ante in spectacular fashion. They went bigger, they went bolder, they went citywide with their humiliation campaign, turning the entire Capitol into a massive gallery of anti-Trump art that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. They projected vintage footage of Trump partying with Epstein onto the Kennedy Center at the same moment Trump's name was literally being removed from that very building, a coincidence of timing that created devastating visual symbolism. The name Trump was coming down while the face Trump was going up alongside a known predator. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd hired a skywriter to spell it out in the clouds. But they didn't stop at the Kennedy Center. They projected images on the Lincoln Memorial, that hallowed ground where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his dream speech, where Americans gather to commemorate their greatest presidents, where the nation's collective memory enshrines its highest ideals. They projected images on the reflecting pool, turning that peaceful body of water into a mirror reflecting political scandal rather than architectural majesty. They projected images on the Justice Department building, connecting the president directly to accusations of protecting criminals. They projected images on the National Mall, transforming the symbolic heart of American democracy into a stage for political theater of the most devastating kind. The visuals were scathing and unforgettable. There was Epstein's mugshot, that stark image of a man who would later be found dead in his jail cell under mysterious circumstances. There was Trump's face alongside Epstein's face, the two men frozen in moments of apparent camaraderie that now seem so sinister in retrospect. There was the slogan, "No one bends the knee like the GOP," a brutal commentary on how the Republican Party had rallied around a president whose associations were becoming increasingly damaging. There were pictures of Trump's allies, Mike Johnson, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, labeled with the words "guardians of pedophiles," a charge so devastating that it would have been unimaginable in any previous political era. These activists were making accusations that would have ended political careers in the past, career-ending charges that would have forced any other politician into immediate retirement. But they weren't just making accusations. They were backing them up with visuals, creating permanent records that could be shared and reshared indefinitely. They weren't just talking about Trump's associations. They were showing them. They weren't just criticizing his judgment. They were demonstrating it. They weren't just questioning his character. They were documenting it in ways that no amount of spin or denial could ever erase. The significance of the timing cannot be overstated. New Epstein documents had just been released, and they contained information that directly contradicted Trump's public statements about his relationship with the convicted predator. An ex-Palm Beach police chief had told the FBI that Trump personally called him in 2006 and said, "Everyone knew Epstein was disgusting." That's a bombshell revelation that completely undermines Trump's claim that he didn't know what Epstein was doing. That's direct evidence that Trump was aware of Epstein's activities at a time when he was still publicly associating with him. That's documentation that raises profound questions about why Trump continued to party with Epstein if he knew what everyone supposedly knew. The timing created a perfect storm of damaging information and visually devastating protest. The documents were providing new factual ammunition. The activists were using that ammunition to create unforgettable imagery. The media was covering both developments intensively. The public was absorbing the entire narrative at once, and Trump was completely powerless to stop any of it. He couldn't suppress the documents because they were in the public domain. He couldn't stop the projections because they were legally protected speech. He couldn't control the media coverage because the story was too big to ignore. He couldn't shape the public narrative because the images were too powerful to spin. This is what makes visual protest so effective in the modern political landscape. Traditional political messaging operates on a different level entirely. A press release can be ignored. A social media post can be scrolled past. A televised speech can be turned off. But massive images projected onto iconic buildings, those force attention, those demand to be seen, those create mental associations that can't be undone. When people see Trump's face projected next to Epstein's face on the Kennedy Center, that image sears itself into their memory. When they see Trump's allies labeled as pedophile protectors, that association sticks. When they see the name Trump being removed from the building while his face appears alongside a convicted predator, the symbolism becomes unavoidable. The activists understand something fundamental about how modern politics works. Words alone don't move people the way they used to. Arguments alone don't penetrate the information bubble the way they once did. Facts alone don't break through the noise the way they should. But visual images projected onto buildings, those work. Visual images that force people to stop and stare and think, those work. Visual images that go viral because they're too powerful to ignore, those work. Visual images that create permanent records that can be called up years later, those work. The activists have figured out that the most effective form of political protest in the digital age is visual, public, and undeniable. And they figured out how to use the city itself as a canvas for their message. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the free world. Its buildings represent American power and prestige. The Lincoln Memorial stands as a monument to the nation's highest ideals. The Kennedy Center symbolizes American cultural achievement. The Justice Department represents the rule of law. When activists project their messages onto these buildings, they're not just communicating with passersby. They're making a statement about what American values should be. They're forcing a confrontation between the ideals these buildings represent and the reality of a president whose associations and actions seem to contradict those ideals. The activists are using Washington's own symbolic power against Trump. They're turning the monuments to American greatness into reminders of American shame. They're transforming the buildings that represent national unity into stages for political division. They're making the capital city itself a participant in the protest, a collaborator in the humiliation, an unwilling partner in the campaign to undermine Trump's image and brand. And the city can't stop them. The city can't prevent them. The city is essentially powerless to prevent its own buildings from becoming billboards for messages that its own political leadership would rather suppress. What does this all tell us about the state of American politics and Trump's position within it? The implications are profound and troubling for a president who has built his entire brand on appearing strong and in control. The activists have found a weapon that works, a tool that bypasses traditional defenses, a method of attack that Trump cannot counter or stop. Projection stunts are simple but devastatingly effective. They're legal, which means security can't shut them down. They're cheap, which means anyone with a projector and some creativity can participate. They're viral, which means the message spreads far beyond the physical location. They're permanent, which means the images exist forever, searchable and shareable across the internet. Trump has the entire federal government at his disposal. He has the Secret Service protecting his person. He has the military enforcing his commands. He has massive resources dedicated to protecting his image. But he cannot prevent activists from projecting images onto buildings. He cannot prevent his past from coming back to haunt him. He cannot prevent Americans from being reminded of his Epstein connections every time he tries to move past the scandal. He cannot prevent his image from being used against him in devastating and humiliating ways. That's a significant limitation on presidential power that Trump's opposition has learned to exploit. This story illustrates how Washington, D.C. is symbolically rejecting Trump and everything he represents. His name is coming off buildings that once bore his name. His face is being projected onto those same buildings paired with Epstein's face. The Capitol's most iconic landmarks are being used to humiliate him rather than celebrate him. The city itself is visually rejecting his brand and his presidency. The skyline is literally turning against him. That's a devastating symbolic blow for someone who craves respect and legitimacy from the nation's elite institutions. The activists have shown that Trump cannot control every narrative or every image, no matter how much power he possesses. They've demonstrated that creative visual protest can be more effective than traditional political messaging. They've proven that projection onto major landmarks is the most powerful tool in the modern protest arsenal, and they've emboldened others to follow their lead, creating a template that will be replicated and refined and expanded upon in the months and years ahead. The Epstein connection is particularly damaging because it cuts to the heart of Trump's moral authority. For all his bravado and bluster, Trump has always struggled with questions about his character and judgment. The Epstein Association feeds directly into those doubts. It suggests that Trump was willing to associate with someone who preyed on vulnerable women. It implies that Trump knew more about Epstein's crimes than he has admitted. It raises questions about whether Trump was complicit in protecting Epstein or covering up his activities. And it creates a narrative that Trump is desperately trying to escape but cannot because the evidence is too powerful and the activists are too relentless. The files that have been released contain information that contradicts Trump's public statements. The ex-Palm Beach police chief's testimony suggests Trump knew about Epstein's disgusting behavior as early as 2006. That creates a timeline problem for Trump's narrative. If Trump knew Epstein was disgusting in 2006, why did he continue to associate with him? If Trump knew about Epstein's crimes, why did he never publicly distance himself? If Trump was aware of what Epstein was doing, why did he never warn anyone or cooperate with investigators? These are questions that Trump cannot answer without damaging himself further. And the activists are making sure those questions stay front and center. The projections have created permanent visual records that will follow Trump throughout his presidency and beyond. Those images of Trump with Epstein on the Kennedy Center are out there forever. Those accusations of protecting pedophiles are permanently documented. Those visual associations are permanently burned into the public consciousness. Trump can try to move past the scandal. He can try to change the subject. He can try to generate new controversies that distract from the old ones. But the images remain. The footage remains. The permanent record exists, and it can be called up at any moment to remind people of what Trump is desperately trying to make them forget. This is a new phase in the opposition to Trump, a creative and effective campaign that uses modern tools to achieve maximum impact. The activists are evolving and becoming more sophisticated. They're learning what works and refining their techniques. They're coordinating their efforts across groups and locations. They're creating ever more elaborate and devastating projections. And there's no sign that they're going to stop. Every projection damages Trump's brand a little bit more. Every projection reminds reminds Americans of his Epstein connections. Every projection undermines his claims of strength and control. The cumulative effect of these projections is going to reshape how Americans view Trump and his presidency. The future of political protest against Trump is visual, public, and creative. Activists have found a tool that bypasses traditional defenses and communicates directly with the public through the most powerful medium available. They're going to keep using projections to humiliate Trump and force him to confront his past. They're going to keep turning Washington, D.C. into a canvas for their messages. They're going to keep creating imagery that goes viral and generates permanent records. And Trump is going to keep being powerless to stop them, forced to watch as his image is used against him in devastating and unforgettable ways. This humiliation in D.C. is just the beginning. The opposition has found its weapon, and they're going to use it relentlessly. The projections will continue. The imagery will get more sophisticated. The impact will grow. Trump will face more humiliation, more visual protests, more reminders of his past. His claims of strength and control will continue to be undermined by activists with projectors and creativity. The narrative around his presidency will increasingly be shaped by these visual protests rather than by his own carefully crafted messaging, and there's nothing he can do to stop any of it. That's the reality facing Trump as he heads toward the 2026 elections. The opposition is becoming more creative and more effective. The visual protests are becoming more damaging and more widespread. The permanent records of his past are becoming more numerous and more impossible to escape. The control he craves is slipping away. The brand he built is being systematically dismantled. The power he projects is being shown to be limited and vulnerable. And the activists who have found their weapon are going to keep using it until they achieve their goals. The projections on the Kennedy Center, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Hilton, those weren't just random protests. They were declarations of war on Trump's image, campaigns to undermine his brand, efforts to expose his vulnerabilities and humiliate him on the world stage. They worked brilliantly. They achieved exactly what their organizers intended. And they've created a template that will be used again and again until Trump either addresses the issues they're raising or faces even more devastating attacks on his reputation. This is the new reality of American politics. The old rules don't apply anymore. The old defenses don't work anymore. The old tactics are insufficient against modern tools of protest and communication. Trump and his team can rage against the projections. They can threaten legal action. They can try to suppress the messages, but they can't stop the movement. They can't undo the imagery. They can't erase the permanent record. And they can't prevent the American people from seeing what the activists are showing them. The story of Trump being laughed out of D.C. over this humiliation is going to be told and retold, shared and reshared, documented and preserved. The images of his face alongside Epstein's on the Kennedy Center will become iconic. The accusations that his allies are protecting pedophiles will stick. The narrative that Trump is weak and vulnerable to creative protest will become embedded in the public consciousness. And the activists who made it all happen will continue their campaign with renewed energy and creativity, knowing that they found a weapon that works against even the most powerful man in the world. That's where we are. That's what this story reveals about American politics in 2026. The powerful are vulnerable. The images matter more than words. The permanent record is permanent, and creative protest can humble even the most arrogant and powerful among us. Trump's humiliation in D.C. is a lesson for everyone who holds power. The old rules are gone. The new rules are being written on the walls, projected onto buildings, shared across the internet. And nobody, not even the President of the United States, can stop it.